I was sitting in the ER bathroom, clutching a wad of hospital tissue to my thighs, watching blood soak through like someone had cut me open. My jeans were already ruined. My hand shook as I whispered to myself, "This isn't normal. This isn't normal." Silas was outside the door, telling the nurse that his girlfriend just had a bad period. His voice was calm. Too calm. I wanted to scream at him. This wasn't a bad period. This was something else. Something violent. I had already gone through 3 super tampons in less than an hour. Each one filled in minutes, leaking through before I could even get out of the bathroom stall. My head was spinning from the blood loss, my vision blurry, and yet, when I looked through the crack of the door, I saw him watching me, not scared, not panicked, watching me like he was taking notes. That's when it hit me. Silas didn't look surprised. He looked like he'd been expecting this, and the most chilling part? This wasn't the first time he had seen it happen. To understand how I ended up in that ER, bleeding out, while the man who claimed to love me stood there like a scientist, observing an experiment, I need to go back to the beginning. Back to when Silas and I still felt safe. Back to when I thought he was my person. When I first met Silas, I thought he was different. He wasn't loud like other guys. He listened. He asked me about my day in a way that made me feel like he actually cared. He'd remember the small things, like how I took my coffee, or the fact that I hated the smell of gasoline. We met through a mutual friend at a party. He wasn't flashy, but he had this presence, the kind that makes you lean in when he talks. Our relationship moved fast. Within weeks, we were spending every night together. Within months, he had a toothbrush at my apartment. My friends teased me, saying, "Wow, Silas really locked you down quick." I laughed it off, because honestly, I was happy. The first time I bled heavy around him, it seemed like an accident. We were watching a movie at his place. I stood up to grab popcorn, and that's when I felt it. Warm, thick, rushing down my legs. I froze, embarrassed. Silas noticed before I could even say anything. He paused the movie, came over and said, "Hey, it's okay. Don't worry." He handed me a towel, gave me space to clean up, and later showed up with iron-rich smoothies, spinach, berries, protein powder. He said, "This will help you get your strength back." At first I was touched. Most guys wouldn't even want to hear about periods, let alone help. But then it started happening again, and again, at first, once a week, then multiple times a week. I couldn't go anywhere without extra tampons stuffed in my purse. My bathroom trash looked like a crime scene. I thought it was stress, maybe hormones. I booked a doctor's appointment. The doctor did tests, prescribed iron pills, said it might be a hormonal imbalance, but nothing explained the suddenness. The way the bleeding would hit me out of nowhere, like a switch flipped. Through it all, Silas stayed close. Almost too close. He kept a little notebook. At first, I thought it was sweet. He said he was tracking when it happened. How heavy, so he could help me figure it out. But over time, the notebook got obsessive. Pages filled with details. The exact time I started bleeding. The exact number of tampons I went through in a day. Notes about my mood, what I ate, even what I wore. When I laughed it off once and said, "You're starting to sound like a scientist," he just smiled. But it wasn't a warm smile. It was sharp, like he knew something I didn't. The bleeding got so bad I had to leave work early more than once. I was exhausted all the time, pale. My head hurt constantly. And Silas? He never looked scared. Never once suggested we go to the hospital. Instead, he'd hand me another smoothie and say, "Drink this. It'll help." But the way he watched me drink it, like he was waiting for something, made me uneasy. I told myself I was being paranoid, that he was just caring in his own way. But deep down, something felt off. The night we ended up in the ER was the worst. We had just gone out for dinner. Halfway through dessert, I felt it again. That sudden gush. This time it was so strong I could feel it soaking through before I even stood up. I whispered to Silas, panicked. He calmly paid the bill, walked me to the car, and drove me straight to the hospital. In the ER bathroom, I locked the door and cried. My jeans were ruined. My thighs were streaked red. I could barely keep my head up. And when I looked through that crack in the door and saw his face, calm, curious, almost satisfied, I realized something. This wasn't care. This was control. That night, I told myself I'd get answers. I'd demand tests, push for explanations, do whatever it took. But the truth was, the answers weren't in the hospital. They were sitting right next to me. Silas already knew why I was bleeding. And deep down, I think I already knew too. When I walked out of the ER bathroom that night, Silas was waiting with a paper cup of water and that same calm expression. The doctor came in. asked the usual questions. Cycle length, birth control, medical history. They ran blood tests, said I was borderline anemic, and scheduled me for an ultrasound. But the truth, they didn't give me answers. They sent me home with iron supplements and instructions to rest. Silas drove us back to his apartment, and the whole way he kept one hand on the wheel and the other reaching for mine. He said things like, "I'll take care of you. You don't have to worry about a thing." Most people would find comfort in that. But I couldn't stop thinking about the look on his face in that ER hallway. That detached, almost satisfied calm. Still, I didn't have the energy to fight. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe he was just being supportive. The next morning, he handed me another smoothie, bright red from strawberries and beets. "Extra iron for you," he said, pressing the glass into my hands. I hesitated. Something in me didn't want it. But when you're exhausted, pale, and constantly bleeding, you'll take anything that promises relief. So I drank it. The bleeding continued. Days blurred together. Tampons, pads, ruined underwear. I stopped wearing anything light-colored. I barely left the apartment. Silas seemed almost pleased by that. Like he liked having me tucked away inside, dependent on him. And then came the notebook. He didn't hide it anymore. He'd sit at the kitchen table, pen scratching across the page while I sat on the couch with the heating pad. He'd glance up at me, jot something down, then ask things like, "How many tampons today?" Or, "Was the flow heavier after the smoothie?" At first, I laughed it off. "What are you, my doctor?" He didn't laugh back. Instead, he said, "I'm just trying to understand you better. Don't you want me to help?" It was hard to argue with that. I did want help. I was scared, but his tone was sharp, defensive, like if I questioned him too much, I'd be the problem. Weeks passed. Doctors kept telling me to monitor things, but nothing made sense. The test came back normal. My hormone levels weren't off enough to explain the hemorrhaging. Meanwhile, Silas was always there, always watching, always mixing smoothies. I remember one night waking up at 2 a.m. to the sound of pages flipping. He was sitting at the edge of the bed, notebook open, writing by the light of his phone. When he noticed I was awake, he didn't even flinch. He just said, "Go back to sleep, baby. I've got it handled." Handled what? I lay awake for hours, my mind racing. One afternoon, I finally snapped. I told him, "Silas, this isn't normal. I need answers. Real answers. Not just smoothies and notes. Something is wrong with me." His jaw tightened. His hand gripped the smoothie glass so hard, I thought it would shatter. "You think I don't know that?" he said. His voice was low, almost a growl. "I'm doing everything I can for you. Do you even appreciate it?" I froze. He had never spoken to me like that before. The room went silent. Finally, he pushed the glass toward me. "Drink it. You'll feel better." And like an idiot, I did. The bleeding got worse. I was going through a tampon every 20 minutes some nights. I started hiding it from him, lying about how many I used, just so he wouldn't write it down. But he always seemed to know. One night, he came into the bathroom while I was changing. I hadn't locked the door. He stood in the doorway, watching me with that same calm, curious look. "Silas, get out!" I snapped, humiliated. He tilted his head. "I just need to see how bad it is." The way he said it, flat, clinical, sent chills through me. I shoved him out and locked the door. I sat there shaking, tampon in hand, realizing I wasn't safe. Not even in the bathroom. That's when Raina called. I didn't know her at first. She introduced herself as Silas's ex-girlfriend. "I know this is going to sound crazy," she said, her voice trembling. "But I need to ask you something. Have you been bleeding? Like really bad?" My stomach dropped. "Yes," I whispered. Silence on the line. Then a shaky breath. "It happened to me too," she said. "When I was with him, I thought I was dying. Doctors couldn't explain it. It stopped when I left him. I think." She hesitated, then said the words that made my blood run cold. "I think it's the smoothies." I dropped the phone. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely pick it up again. "Raina, what do you mean?" I demanded. She told me everything. The sudden heavy bleeding. The obsession with helping. The smoothies. Her story was mine. Almost word for word. That night, I sat across from Silas at the dinner table, staring at the glass in front of me. The thick red drink. His expectant eyes. I knew then, something inside me whispered, "Don't drink it." I pushed the glass away. Silas's eyes narrowed. "Why aren't you drinking it?" he asked. And in that moment, I realized he wasn't going to let me stop. Silas stared at me across the table. His smoothie sat untouched in front of me, thick and red, the straw leaning against the glass like a silent dare. "Why aren't you drinking it?" he asked again. His voice was low, calm, but there was an edge in it. Something sharp, dangerous. I forced a smile, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I'm just not in the mood, I said. Stomach feels weird. His eyes stayed locked on mine. For a long time, neither of us moved. Then slowly, he leaned back in his chair. You've been talking to Raina, haven't you? My breath caught. He said it so casually, like he was commenting on the weather. I tried to play dumb. Raina? Who's? Don't. He interrupted, his tone flat. I know she called you. My skin went cold. He knew. He always knew. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying his words in my head. He didn't deny it. He didn't ask why I was suspicious. He just knew. I thought about Raina's voice on the phone, shaky but certain. It stopped when I left him. Was it really the smoothies? I wanted to believe I was overreacting, that this was all in my head. But my body told me otherwise. The bleeding was worse than ever. My skin looked grey in the mirror. Every step left me dizzy. And every time I lifted a glass Silas handed me, I couldn't stop thinking about what might be hidden inside. The next morning, I made a decision. I told him I was too tired to drink anything. I pushed the smoothie away again. His face darkened. You need it, he said. I don't, I whispered. My voice cracked, but I forced myself to hold his gaze. Something flickered in his eyes. Panic, anger, maybe both. Then he slammed his hand on the counter, making me jump. You think I'm trying to hurt you? He hissed. After everything I've done for you, I'm the only one keeping you alive right now. The words chilled me. Keeping me alive. That afternoon, I packed a small bag. Just the essentials. Wallet, keys, phone charger. My plan was to leave while he was at the gym. But Silas didn't go to the gym that day. He stayed home. He followed me from room to room, watching me. Every time I picked something up, his eyes narrowed. Finally, I snapped. What is in the smoothie, Silas? I demanded. He froze. The silence was unbearable. Then, with a strange calm, he said, You don't want to know. Yes, I whispered. I do. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing. For a moment, I thought he was going to lie, like he always did. But then his shoulders slumped. I put something in them, he admitted quietly. My stomach dropped. What? He wouldn't look at me. Just something to make sure we don't have kids. You said you weren't ready. You said you didn't want that stress. I stared at him in disbelief. So you drugged me? His voice rose, defensive now. I didn't drug you. I just crushed up some Plan B. That's it. It's safe. It's just birth control. My head spun. Plan B, every day, for weeks? No wonder my body was breaking down. No, I whispered, shaking my head. That's not how it works. You can't just. Silas, you've been poisoning me. He flinched at the word. Poisoning? Don't be dramatic. I was protecting us. Protecting you. Protecting me. I wanted to laugh. To scream. To tear the walls down around us. Instead, I just stood there, trembling, the reality crashing into me like a tidal wave. The bleeding. The exhaustion. The hospital trip. It wasn't my body failing me. It was him. The days that followed were hell. I tried to distance myself, but Silas clung tighter. He hovered over me constantly, bringing me food and drinks I refused to touch. He begged, pleaded, then snapped when I pushed the glasses away. You're making a mistake, he said one night, his voice cracking. You need me. You'll see. I slept with my bag hidden under the bed, phone clutched in my hand. But every time I thought about running, I remembered how calm he had looked in that ER. How easy it would be for him to explain me away as just sick. I felt trapped, and then the bleeding didn't stop. Even after I stopped drinking the smoothies, it continued. Day after day, I thought cutting him off would fix it, but it didn't. That's when I realized. This wasn't just Plan B. It couldn't be. Something darker was happening. Something I couldn't yet name. And Silas? He knew exactly what it was. One night, desperate for answers, I went through his desk drawer while he was in the shower. There, beneath stacks of notebooks, I found his laptop, open, the screen glowing, and what I saw in his search history made my blood run cold. Queries like, untraceable poisons that cause hemorrhaging, how to make permanent menstruation, non-lethal ways to bleed someone out. Slowly, my knees buckled. Wasn't just about kids. Silas wanted me to bleed forever. I stared at that search history, my hands shaking so badly I thought I might drop the laptop. It wasn't paranoia. It wasn't stress. It wasn't my imagination. Silas had been researching how to destroy me from the inside out. I wanted to scream, to run, to smash the computer into his face and make him admit what he'd done. But instead, I closed the laptop, shoved it back where I found it, and climbed into bed before he came out of the shower. I lay there in the dark, pretending to sleep, my heart pounding against the mattress. His body slid in next to mine, warm and steady, like nothing was wrong. But I knew then, if I didn't get out, I wasn't going to survive. The next morning, I called Raina. I told her everything. The smoothies, the confession about Plan B, the search history. She went silent for a long time, and then she whispered, "Oh my God, I knew it. I knew there was more." Her voice shook as she told me that after she left Silas, the bleeding stopped almost overnight. But she still had scars. She developed anemia that took months to recover from, and every time she thought about him, her chest tightened with fear. "You need to get out," she said. "You need to go to the police." I wanted to believe it was that simple, but I'd been with Silas long enough to know he was careful. He was calculated. He'd never leave a trail that pointed straight back to him. Still, I couldn't keep this to myself anymore. So I went to the police. Sitting in that sterile station, I felt exposed. My voice shook as I explained the heavy bleeding, the smoothies, the confession, the search history. The detective across from me frowned, scribbling notes. "Do you have proof?" he asked. I saw his searches, I said. "Do you have screenshots?" I shook my head. He sighed. "We can look into it, but unless there's physical evidence linking him to your condition, it's difficult to build a case. Plan B isn't illegal, and heavy bleeding alone won't stand up in court." My stomach dropped. I felt like I was dying in front of them, and all they wanted was paperwork. But a week later, the detective called me back. "We checked his devices," he said. "You were right. His search history is concerning. I snapped. "He's trying to kill me." The detective hesitated. "We can't prove intent yet, but we'll keep digging." It wasn't enough. It never felt like enough. Around that time, I started noticing something else. Silas's mother. She called me one evening after hearing I'd been in and out of the hospital. Her voice was soft, almost weary. "You need to know something," she said. I braced myself. "What?" Her words came slow, heavy, like she was pulling them out of a locked box. "His father did the same thing to me. For 30 years, I couldn't breathe." She explained how Silas's dad had crushed pills, slipped things into her drinks, and kept her bleeding constantly. Doctors never found anything concrete, and she never had the strength to fight back. "I thought it was love," she whispered. "I thought it was care, but it was control. It was his way of keeping me weak, of keeping me quiet, and now Silas was doing it to me." The cycle repeating itself. I wanted to throw up. It wasn't just Silas. It was learned, inherited. A family pattern of cruelty disguised as love. I asked her, desperate, "Why didn't you stop him? Why didn't you warn me?" Her silence was answer enough. Because she hadn't escaped. Because she was still trapped in her own way. And now I was too. Raina and I grew closer during those weeks. We called almost every night, piecing together our stories like detectives ourselves. We compared symptoms, timelines, things Silas had said. The similarities were terrifying. And then Emily reached out. She was his new girlfriend. Or maybe I should say, his other girlfriend. Because from the looks of it, Silas had been lining her up, even while he was with me. Her voice shook as she said, "Something's wrong. I've been bleeding. It won't stop." My stomach twisted. It was happening again. He was doing it again. The three of us formed a fragile alliance. We started documenting everything. Text messages, dates, symptoms, even photos. We shared screenshots, journal entries, anything that might later be called proof. Because if the police weren't going to protect us, we had to protect ourselves. We weren't just fighting for survival anymore. We were fighting for justice. And for the first time, I didn't feel completely alone. But Silas must have sensed something shifting. Because one night, he cornered me in the kitchen, his face inches from mine. "You've been talking to them, haven't you?" he hissed. My blood went cold. His hands tightened around the counter on either side of me, trapping me. "You think they'll save you? You think anyone will?" His eyes burned into me, wild and certain. And then he whispered something that made my skin crawl. "You'll never stop bleeding. Not until I want you to." That night, I realized this wasn't just about survival anymore. It was war. And if I didn't act fast, I wasn't going to make it out alive. Silas's words haunted me. "You'll never stop bleeding. Not until I want you to." That night, I didn't sleep. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, clutching my phone, half expecting him to slip something into the water on my nightstand. Every sound made me flinch. The hum of the fridge, the creak of the floorboards, even his steady breathing beside me. I realized then, I couldn't keep waiting for someone else to save me. If the police weren't going to stop him, I had to take matters into my own hands. The next morning, I called Raina and Emily. "We need to go public," I whispered. At first, they were hesitant. afraid, but I reminded them. Silas was never going to stop. Not until we exposed him. So we started documenting everything. More photos, more journals, even secret recordings. Every smoothie he handed me, I poured into a jar and hid. Every strange note in his handwriting, I scanned. Every threatening word he whispered, I wrote down immediately. We compiled it all into a massive folder. Dates, times, patterns, evidence. And then we reached out to a journalist. She specialized in uncovering medical abuse cases. At first, she sounded skeptical, but when she read through our files, her tone changed. "This is horrifying," she said. "If you're ready to go on the record, I'll publish it." We were terrified, but we said yes. The article exploded. The man who made women bleed. A pattern of abuse, hidden in plain sight. Our faces weren't shown, but our voices were. Our words, our stories. The internet lit up. Forums, social media, even local news stations picked it up. People were horrified. Women reached out from all over, sharing their own stories of mysterious illnesses, abusive partners, manipulative caretakers. Some wondered aloud if Silas had more victims. For the first time, I felt a sliver of power. But the justice system didn't deliver. The DA declined to prosecute, saying the evidence wasn't strong enough for a criminal conviction. Silas walked free. It crushed me. But then Raina said something that stuck. "We don't need their system to validate our truth. We can still fight." So we filed a civil case. It wasn't easy. It wasn't quick. But together, we pushed forward. Protective orders, depositions, every piece of evidence we had, laid bare in front of attorneys who finally seemed to listen. Even if we couldn't put him behind bars, we could take his control, his reputation, his freedom to keep moving unchecked. Meanwhile, my health was still a battlefield. The bleeding didn't stop overnight. Some days it slowed. Other days it surged like a fresh wound. Doctors were baffled. Specialists tried everything. Hormonal therapies, iron infusions, even experimental treatments. My body wasn't the same. Maybe it never would be. But at least now I wasn't alone. Raina would call me after appointments, reminding me to rest. Emily sat with me through infusions, holding my hand when the IV needle burned. We weren't just survivors. We were sisters now, bound by pain, bound by the choice to rise anyway. Silas, of course, tried to spin the story. He called me crazy, said Raina was obsessed, claimed Emily was just jealous. But his words didn't matter anymore, because the world had seen the receipts, the notebooks, the search history, the women, us. And every time he tried to twist the narrative, another wave of outrage hit him harder. He couldn't silence us anymore. Months passed. The case crawled forward. Some days I wanted to give up, crawl back into silence, let the world forget. But then I'd get a message from a stranger online. Another woman saying, "Your story made me realize what was happening to me." And I'd remember. This wasn't just about me. It was about breaking the cycle. Silas had learned this cruelty from his father. If we didn't stop him, someone else would suffer. So we kept pushing. One night, after a particularly draining day of depositions, the three of us sat in Raina's living room, sipping tea instead of smoothies. Wrapped in blankets, we were quiet for a while. Then Emily said softly, "I don't know if I'll ever feel normal again." Raina nodded. "Me neither. But maybe normal isn't the goal. Maybe it's just surviving together." I thought about that as I looked at them. These women who should have been strangers, but had become my lifeline. We were scarred, broken in ways no one could see, but we were still here. And that, I realized, was its own kind of justice. Silas didn't go to prison. The system failed us there, but he lost everything else: his job, his social circle, his mask of being the caring boyfriend. The truth was out, and once truth takes root, it spreads. I don't bleed the way I used to, though I'll probably deal with the damage for the rest of my life. Some nights, I still wake up shaking, expecting to see him at the foot of my bed, with that notebook in his hands. But then I remind myself, he doesn't own me anymore. I own my story, and by telling it, I take back everything he tried to steal.